Well, I see we're now 2 minutes past the top of the hour. Mary, I think we can go ahead and get started. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah, I think it's
Excellent.
perfect.
Great. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining us for this quarterly webinar that we've settled into that cadence of sharing updates and insights around kind of consulting at Core Talent, but then really more broadly, just what does effective leadership mean in today's landscape? And so we have an exciting presentation to share with you. We've been working a lot with clients to think about, as we sort of come out of a set of challenges, and then maybe as we step into a new set of challenges, and as we plan for the growth of our companies, what does success look like, especially through the lens of your people? And so we're really excited to share with you the content in today's webinar. What we do here at Core Talent more broadly is we are, I think, really well known for helping you get top talent into your company, and have a very strong reputation in that regard. Through our consulting services, it's really about helping you create people strategies that will achieve your business goals in your business strategy. And that is the absolute center of the bullseye in terms of what we're going to be sharing with you today. Now, before we get into our topic, Mary, I know you wanted to just share a couple of thoughts around sort of a people plan in general and then your
Yep.
experience. And so what's on your mind?
Yeah, well, and I hope that I can maybe share some stories, of real life situations along the way. I think it always makes it a little bit more meaningful. But, you know, um, unfortunately, about 90% of the time when we are asked to work on a key leader search, our client organization is already behind the eight ball. And then you put on top of that the time it takes to get the right person in the seat. Last year, our average time to fill was 84 days. Today, it is at 101 days. So that timeline, unfortunately, is creeping up. It just makes it even more of a challenge. So I think if there's one takeaway that I would love for you to get today, it is to look at your people or through a different lens, and that would be a proactive lens. So
Perfect. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's just the research and the current around the current state for some of our clients. We'll sort of end with this bit of advice, but don't wait, right? Like, let's just start partnering right now. We also ran into a bit of research last week as we were doing some final prep for the webinar. I think we're all familiar with the Great Resignation. And what some of these larger research firms are finding is that when companies backfill from employees who left, it's about a 7-year experience gap that they're needing to make up for between the person that was in the role and the person that they're hiring. I mean, 7 years, that's a long time. And so, Mary, you talk about being behind the eight ball. Um, it's
yeah.
not the end of the world. You can make it up, but you want to do everything you can to maximize your growth opportunities, and your people are your biggest asset. And so we're excited to share with you today how People Plant can help in that regard. What you see on the screen here is the agenda that we'll use for the next 55 minutes or so. We'll spend a little bit of time just talking, what is a people plan? I don't think that's a term that most of us on the webinar today are familiar with. So we'll kind of go through the elements of what a people plan is. We'll talk about some of the common challenges that companies experience when they make that decision, want to put a people plan in place. Kind of, where do I get started, right? What are the things I need to be thinking about? And then we'll, throughout our time really, but spend some specific time at the end connecting how people plans can help your company grow. As you think about those exciting, aggressive growth goals that you have, what do you need in place for your people in order to be successful? All of our webinars focus on 3 areas: education, discussion, and then commitments. And so we'll share a lot of really good content with you. This is a nice intimate group here. If you have a question, we're monitoring the chat. We have our Allison, our faithful organizer, is going to be looking for questions. You can always come off mute if there's something you want to just ask right away. We're happy to kind of dive into whatever questions that you might have. And then at the end, we'll actually say, hey, based on everything we shared with you, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna leverage this information to be the best leader possible and maximize the benefit for your company? Okay, so let's talk about what a business plan is. And before we get into, or what a people plan is, excuse me, before we get into the people plan specific, let's start by thinking about your business because every consulting engagement we embark on, really everything we do here at Court Talent is about helping businesses be more effective. And so if you're growing, which I'm going to assume either you are or you're planning to grow, what does your business need to do for growth? Well, some common questions that are probably going through your mind are, what additional value are we going to provide for our customers or our clients? That would be things like new products, new solutions, strategic initiatives, goals, rocks, if that language sounds familiar to you. Additionally, what new ways are you going to market and sell, to your customers? Well, that's going to involve things like marketing and the sales strategy. You might be also wondering, how are you going to maintain and grow your profit, right? You want to make sure that you're maintaining the overall health of your business. And so that's going to involve a sense of financial analysis, right? Having some good financial acumen in your company. And then lastly, what are you going to need to scale your operations? And so that'll involve things like, your overall operations port function of your business, or maybe some capital investments. All of these things come together sort of like puzzle pieces, uh, and help you think about planning for the growth of your business. Now, Mary, you've got a lot of experience with business plans and planning for growth. Is there anything around this slide that you wanted to share?
Well, I can think of an example, and some of you on this webinar will know exactly what I'm talking about. But you think about some of these things, and one of the areas that come to mind are, wow, all of a sudden I need an ERP system, or I need a much more robust ERP system. And now all of a sudden you've added IT needs, you've added different financial analysis needs. You've probably added the need to look at your business processes. And so think about how complex your organization just got, and the fact that you probably don't have all the right talent in place to do something as simple as, well, ERP systems are not simple, but one new thing that you might introduce to your business. So that's just a quick example, but I'm sure you can think of many, many more.
But that example is perfect, Mary, and really highlights sort of this last question in planning for growth that tends to get unasked, right? As we were preparing for this webinar, we were like, businesses, as they're thinking about growth, all of these areas are important, but the skills and experiences needed to be successful, that can sometimes feel like an add-on, or maybe like an after the fact question that we just kind of figure out. And really, you think about the way that you answer that question is through your people. But because it goes unasked, you tend to have these little like pockets of solutions. Oh, we'll kind of take care of experiences or skills over here, and maybe we'll address some of it over there. But there's no clear strategy. There's no coherent way that you as a leader or an executive or your company is going to approach really preparing or creating that capability within your organization to execute on those goals. And so that gets us to what a people plan is. And kind of at its most simple level, a people plan is really a plan for talent growth that advances your business plan. It's saving space as you're preparing for growth to ask that question and put some elements in place that are going to, give you more confidence, right? Give you a plan so that as you think about growing your company, you're going to be able to execute on those goals. If you think about sort of your broader team, your company, it's a way for the people to stay aligned, right? And around your most important asset, which is, of course, your people. And then almost most importantly, for your employees, the actual individuals doing the work and executing on the goals, it's going to give them confidence in their senior leaders. It's going to allow them to know that their senior leaders are looking after them, and the knowledge that if I stay at this company, I'm going to continue to grow and develop, and we're going to do these really good, cool things. And so the point that we're trying to make here is that a people plan is just so critical to the growth of your business. And unfortunately, as we mentioned, often can get overlooked. Now, There's a lot that goes into a people plan. That's really what we're going to spend the remainder of the webinar discussing. But some of the common questions, if you think about that planning for business growth, you ask those questions. Well, there's questions that a people plan is designed to answer as well. And so questions like, well, what roles do you need 1 to 2 years out? That's going to influence things like the hiring of your organization. Do you know who your top performers are, right? What are they capable of? How are they going to grow? Well, that's going to influence how you practice talent development, how you manage your performance in your organization. Do you have a positive and engaged culture? I think we all kind of intuitively know the benefits of a positive and engaged culture, but over time, and especially right now with the Great Resignation, it's just so critical. And so being able to measure employee engagement, have a pulse in your culture is so critical. Do you have a plan to prepare future leaders? Have an elements of succession planning in place? And then do you know how to retain your best people? And often that boils down to things like compensation and total rewards. Well, these are also all pieces of the puzzle that when they come together and when you have that cohesive people plan in place, it can just really present a much clearer picture for your organization around how you're going to not only be successful, but bring your employees along in the ride. Yeah, Mary, anything you wanted to add at this point in time?
Yeah, I think the importance of touching on every single one of these areas, and
Mhm.
when Rick and I were planning for this, we said, companies are in different stages, right? You may have a very sophisticated hiring system, and maybe performance management, but haven't really done much in terms of succession planning, or even, talent development. And that's okay because, you can't do everything all at once, but it is really critical that you're factoring in each one of these pieces, because again, if your hiring system is awesome and you are hiring 30, 40, 50 people a year and that's going well, but your turnover is high, or more importantly, you're not getting the production out of those people, there's other pieces that are missing. And so it's just always important to look at this from a very holistic, viewpoint. And that's
Yeah,
hard because it does take time and energy and money, and we get that. But even if you can look at a piece of each one of these, it will help.
yeah, absolutely. Very well stated, Mary. And really kind of piggybacking off what you just said, Mary, um, a people plan really is effective leadership. Effective leadership is having a people plan in place. We actually, some of you may have participated in the poll we did preparing for this quarter's webinar. And effective leadership, how to lead more effectively, that was the main thing that our sort of core talent community was interested in knowing about. And so we were challenging ourselves and we were saying, well, it's such a big topic. How do we start? How do we create some bit of progress or advance people's thinkings? And we just kind of agreed it has to be a people plan because, as Mary mentioned, it's that holistic view around leading the talent in my organization. Just referencing the words on the screen, making sure that we have the right people at the right time in the right place to maximize our business growth. And when you do that, there's all sorts of healthy outcomes for your company. I think Mary mentioned some of the challenges that companies face or our clients are facing. But when you get it right, you avoid sort of those reactive cycles, right? That plan allows you to be more thoughtful and purposeful and have a higher level of retention, right? You know who you're going to hire, you know when you're going to promote, helps you retain talent. And then just helps you have healthier processes overall that keep people engaged and motivated and confident in the direction of the business. All right, so let's talk about the elements of a people plan. Let's talk about how do we make sure that we use a people plan to have the right people in the right place at the right time. Now, we're going to do a little bit of an activity. You're probably tired of hearing Mary and I talk for 15 minutes straight here. So if you can, in the chat, I want you to type in the letter that you identify with the most. So we've got all the elements of the people plan that we talked about in the introduction. And I'm curious, what is your top question? What are you most interested in learning about? And so, A through E. If you do have a different one, I think we're curious to know what that other one would be. And if you're willing to say G, we applaud your honesty. It's like retaining best people out of the gate. Developing future leaders. Paolo was willing to admit G. Thank you, Paolo. Knowing who your top performers are. So it looks like developing future leaders and retaining your best people. We'll certainly share some really good insights around those two. But Mary, like you referenced, often one kind of connects to the other if we use that puzzle metaphor. So that's, if you've got a pain point, you're going to get some good insights in this next section of content. But just remember, all the pieces are important.
Yeah, and we're going to do this poll again at the end, and it'll be
Yep.
interesting to see if anything has changed.
Yeah, perfect. Excellent. All right, so let's talk about what roles you might need 1 to 2 years out. This is probably one of the stronger immediate connections between the people plan and the business plan, right? So you're looking at your strategic initiatives, and you're kind of playing out, okay, if we're successful, and Mary, your ERP example is just perfect here, right? If we're going to grow, we're going to need an ERP, and that means that we're going to need more capability in our operations department. We're going to need more oversight, which might mean more in finance or HR. I'll just be honest, one of my personal favorite topics to talk about is how's your leadership going to change as your organization grows? What more leadership capability are you going to need? And then how does that start to influence your org chart or your accountability chart, excuse me. And the accountability chart is not the same thing as your org chart, but what does that mean in terms of new functions, new teams? Again, what might you need from a leadership perspective, and how are you going to keep the culture, right? Keep the strengths that you have, enhance them, and then also address for gaps. Mary, I know you have a lot of experience helping companies in this area. What comes to mind when you think about planning for roles 1 to 2 years out?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in just a minute, but I think Paulo has a question, if I'm
Oh,
reading this
perfect. Okay,
correctly.
Paulo, can you go off mute? Are you able to?
Yeah. Are you guys able to hear me and see me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah.
So tech wizard here. No, I'm kidding. I was just wondering, many companies enter into this catch-22 scenario in which, from my personal experience, I worked at a startup once. And what happened was that it was growing very fast, like most startups do. But the thing is that they couldn't figure out if they needed to hire an external individual to be the manager or if they should promote someone to be manager, because that also they did that, they promoted somebody, but that created a very weird environment, because since it's a startup, everyone usually starts here.
Yeah.
And then we all know how each other works, so why are you going to be my manager, and all of a suddenly you're going to ask me to do my work differently if it's been getting the results. So that happened, and I was on the HR department for that. So as you can imagine, it was not an easy task. So that was my question, like in your personal experience, what do you guys recommend doing, or what are some of the key factors that you have in mind in order to make a decision?
I'd love to answer that, and it kind of plays into what I was going to say here, and that's a great question, Paulo, and we see this all the time. I think as much as we love to do search work, right? The first question we always ask our clients is, do you have somebody internally that could be a fit for this role? I think we philosophically we would agree that that's always the best choice, because you've got that tribal knowledge to draw on. I mean, Rick said, if you hire from the outside, even an experienced person, there's oftentimes, can be like a 7-year skill gap. And so it's always best to start there. And I think the challenge of being a peer and going into a supervisory role is so real, and it will always be there. Um, and that's where I think the leadership development comes into play. And I think so many of us, and I've made the same mistake to promote somebody into a role that they just simply were not prepared for. And, I think it's up to leaders to make sure that that person is successful. And, there's ways to manage your peers, by being humble, by drawing on their expertise, by it's a different form of leadership, not autocratic or bureaucratic, right? It's more inclusive. And so there's so many different ways that you can make that a really successful outcome. But just being aware of it, slow down enough to like say this is going to be a challenge, and let's set this person up for success.
Okay.
Did that help?
Yeah, I believe that the main conclusion that I can get out of it is always trust your internal talent first to see. And that was just another issue that happened at another company that was all of the contrary. They would hire external people to do, supervisor and manager stuff, but they didn't really know the company. So it
Yeah.
was more to, well, that happened in my case. I worked in marketing for a while as a recruiter, and they hired a new operations manager, and he didn't know anything. So I had to explain it to him like, hey, you need to do this or do that. And it was weird because he was my boss, but he asked me, hey, am I doing this wrong, or am I doing this right? And I was like, you're the
Yeah.
boss.
Well, and that's great that that person had, the forthright to like ask, right?
Yeah.
And that's setting that person up for success. So yeah. So real quick, just to add on, I think this is where a lot of smaller businesses to get into trouble, because we all have job descriptions, or hopefully we have job descriptions, but oftentimes the verbiage in, in let's say, a manager of operations versus a director of operations is very small change, right? The verbiage, it's almost even hard to like tell the difference. And I think that's where we have to get more clear about what does strategic thinking look like in a director of operations versus a manager. And you got to get really tactical. That's kind of funny. Really tactical to figure out what it looks like, what strategic looks like. And so I think oftentimes we're just moving too fast, and we're not taking a step back and really looking at what is needed that 1, 2, 3 years out. So
Yeah, that's very well said, Mary. I know that you're both passionate and very eloquent. Can you just describe the difference between an accountability chart and an organizational chart? Because I think that's a
yeah.
useful context for a lot of our people in the webinar today.
Yeah, well, and for those of you who are following the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS, aka Traction, you will know this already. But for those who aren't, an organizational chart is really a reporting structure, where an accountability chart is, who is ultimately accountable for a specific function. And the key difference is, in an organizational chart, you have one name in one box. And in an accountability chart, you can have one name in multiple boxes, but never more than one name in a box, if that makes sense. So it's just getting really clear about accountabilities. And we actually have a seminar we're going to be doing this fall about the new organization of the future. And it's taking a matrixed environment where it's not really a top down, kind of to the next level. It's like on steroids. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, excellent plug. Go to our website, coretalent.com. You can sign up for our newsletter. That was exciting. Lots more good stuff on that one. Yeah, excellent. All right, so let's move to the next question, which was, do you know who your top performers are and what they're capable of? I think this was one of the areas of interest for our audience. One of the things that we see is as an organization grows, right? They might be adding a layer of management that didn't exist, or there's just a bigger org chart, right? And that CEO or that president, where they might be able to kind of like either physically look out or sort of metaphorically look out, but see the performance of everyone within their organization. That goes away, right? And so this is a good example of where a maturing people process, like having that plan in place, can really help set your organization up for success. And so if you were loose previously in terms of having goals, checking in on performance, being able to review outcomes, whether you call that an annual review or you do something different, but having that process in place to manage performance throughout the organization becomes really, really important to maintain a sort of this alignment and understanding in terms of what good looks like in our organization and who those top performers are. Now, in terms of what they're capable of, really what you're talking about there is being able to develop talent within your organization. And so, from an employee perspective, often that boils down to knowing what their career goals are, having a sense of what their aspirations are, and then from a management perspective, using that content, because that's where the vast majority of motivation to grow and develop is going to come from. And so we always encourage our client to get a handle on career goals and aspirations, not because it's a promise that you can make to an employee, but more so it's a way to shape that development discussion that's going to be intrinsically motivating for the employee. Skill building, I don't think we have to sell anyone on this in this webinar that skill building is important. The takeaway here is that it's just really easy to put off to the side, right? And so saving time for learning, thinking about that sharpening the saw metaphor, if you're familiar with 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? Our skills kind of tend to get dull over time. There's research out there that talks about the half-life of a skill. It used to be 5 years. It's actually getting even shorter. So about 4.5 years from today, your skills are going to be about half as valuable as they are right now. And then having a general sense of what the low cost, high impact development opportunities are. This is, simple things like stretch assignments, getting people to get exposure to new teams through a rotation experience, having some type of a mentor program. These often don't require a ton of time or resources to prop up, but can have a huge, huge impact on an employee's development. In that case, cascades down to being more engaged and ultimately more productive. Again, Mary, any comments you wanted to make on this slide?
Yeah, well, I have an example that we did at Core Talent in terms of these stretch assignments and mentor programs. So, we had a couple initiatives that we wanted to tackle this year. One is volunteering, and getting a more cohesive plan in place that all of our people kind of stood behind. Another one was our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So we decided to create project teams, and we had people who were really interested in developing their team leadership skills. And we assigned those people based on their passion and interest, in doing this. And then we coupled them up with one of our leadership team members so that they could be that coach and mentor. But that person was really, running the team. And it's just a perfect example of, developing those skills and doing something that's still impactful for the organization. And everybody wins in this. So, you can always find new ways to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. I'm connecting this slide back to Paula's comment, by the way. Paula, if I can just quickly address one of the points you brought up. We know that from a talent development perspective, technical skills are not the same as leadership skills. And so we actually have a development offering called the Leadership Accelerator that works really well at helping employees, participants, and then leaders quantify what that development gap is for that person to accelerate their leadership abilities. And so in addition to sort of the low cost, high impact, there are also ways that Core Talent partners with organizations who want to make a more earnest effort at directly addressing a high performing or a leader's overall development.
Oh, well, Thank you very much. I think that that is very, very helpful because also in my experience, I've had the chance to hire people that have a lot of experience doing, the technical amount of things that are necessary, that know all of the programs, but in terms to maybe people management or man managing, it's just uncharted territory for them.
Yeah.
So you do see them suffer a lot because of
Yep.
that.
And sleep a little bit easier tonight, Paulo, knowing just about every company under the sun struggles with that. Okay?
Yeah, I know, I know. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mary?
Yeah, I had my mic on. Sorry. One other thing I was just going to mention is, we oftentimes spend all of our time on people that may be struggling in their role versus spending time with our highest performers. Those are the people that we should be really developing. So many times we see these situations where someone hires a very skilled and experienced person on the outside, and then they put them in a room and say go, because they're doing something oftentimes that nobody else in the company is doing. But those people still need coaching and development and direction. And so we see this a lot, and it's really a pitfall that most companies experience. So we need to be more intentional about those highest performers as well.
Excellent. Very well said. All right. Well, the next question that we asked in terms of what goes into a people plan is around having a positive and engaged culture. Again, I think it's very common that companies would say, well, we should do an employee engagement survey. What I've found in my experience is that the intent of doing an employee engagement survey often doesn't match the outcomes or the actual product of uh, polling and measuring engagement. And so just a quick bit of advice or tidbits of information if you're in this camp of wanting to measure employee engagement. There's a lot of tools out there. Just referencing my own experience, I personally think that the Gallup Q12 engagement survey is bang for your buck, one of the best you can do. Very easy to facilitate, relatively cost effective. You can benchmark your results against their entire database. So you just get a really, really good context around how your results compare to, the broader population that's completed that survey. But the main thing, the most important thing is that you talk about the results and the results lead to action. If you don't put those results into action, it's going to generate a sense of apathy, which will actually probably be worse than if you would have done nothing at all. And so just know if this is something you want to engage in, it really requires a sense of commitment and follow through. Some very simple ways is to not necessarily take it all on as yourself as a leader. Treat it as a broader development opportunity, kind of like the one Mary talked about. Assign an employee committee to identify some actions that can have a positive impact based on the results. I'm getting the sense you wanted to share something, Mary. Do you want to share something? No, you're good? Okay. I'm certainly not going to sit here and say I myself am an expert on fostering inclusive environments. We do, I think, can readily admit that's been a very dynamic and front of mind topic for many of our employees. I'm going to say simple, some easy to start activities, not necessarily easy to make progress on or easy to, execute on, but some easy things to start. Just rethinking how you approach work and how you think about an inclusive environment today. There's a ton of great information, whether it be TED Talks or books or podcasts, but topics that you want to look for, things like psychological safety, unconscious bias, cultural awareness. There's just a lot of active discussion right now, a lot of great learning sort of at your fingertips if you know how to search for it through those different mediums. Again, with inclusive environments, this is really about a conversation. Same with employee engagement. And so talking to your employees, knowing what's most important to them. Miriam, remember preparing for this, and the culture at one organization is going to look very different from the culture at another organization. And so avoid the external benchmarks or the shoulds, so to speak, and really focus on what's going to be best for your employees based on your culture. And then if you can, kind of distill it down to maybe one simple goal, an action or an outcome that the company can rally behind. And then when you get that done, that might lead to another goal, which would lead to another goal, which would ultimately lead to a more inclusive environment. I don't know, Mary, anything you want to say here?
No, I think you hit it right on the head. Keep it simple and start small,
Yeah.
but small and meaningful. And it could be something completely different than what you read about and that as best practices. So
Good, good. All right, I know that this was one of our top questions from the survey. Do you have a plan to develop future leaders? Is succession planning, it just seems like this is always front of mind for our clients. It's very, very common that leaders in an organization are thinking about, who's going to step up, who are those future leaders, and rightfully so, right? This is basically, one of the most important elements of a growth strategy, right? Who's going to lead some of these initiatives in a way that gives us as a current executives confidence, but then also, generates a positive experience or a positive outcome for our clients. And so that's, succession planning is a fairly well-established process. And there are certainly some best practices that go into it. I think one of the most important outcomes from today's webinar around succession planning is that you want to be strategic in terms of how you're assigning development activities in a way that doesn't treat succession planning like a light switch. I've been involved in certain succession plans where the person doesn't even know that they're on the succession plan. So they're being groomed in the dark, or maybe not even being groomed at all, but there's this assumption, well, when I step down, this person's going to fill my role. And that's, not strategic. That's sort of crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. One of the best ways to educate this strategy around succession planning is to do a talent review assessment. And for those of you who are familiar with talent reviews, in the past, they've also been referred to as 9-box. Basically, what it is, it's a way to assess both an employee's current performance as well as their overall potential, sort of in the same conversation. And so, I'm kind of boiling it down to its most core aspects, but as a leadership team, you get together and you align in terms of who is got a high performance right now, who also has a high potential, and then who has that passion to continue to grow and advance their career. And when you get leaders in the same room and you start talking about these things, it's unbelievable just the types of insights around people planning that get unlocked. And there's a select handful of people that the leadership team will often rally behind and say, these are our future leaders. These are the people we need to put on succession plans. And this is how we're going to start to prepare them over time. And so it's just an incredibly impactful exercise for organizations to do kind of on an annual basis. That's usually the best cadence to do talent review assessments. Now, and actually this gets back to some comments that were made previously. There might be a build buy discussion that also needs to happen. And so if you've got a new line of business that you're opening up, right, you don't have that internal expertise, so you need to bring it into your company. That's the kind of situation where you would have a build buy conversation. Is there someone that can kind of step into this and learn it, or do we need to sort of start with an established expert and get this functionality that this role is intending to bring up and running a little bit faster?
I think a great example that I see quite often here is especially in highly technical companies where the performance is stellar of an employee and everybody knows that that person has potential. But guess what? They don't have the passion for it or really even interest. And that's a hard decision to make. But if you're thinking 2-3 years out, that person may not be the leader that you had hoped that they would be. You need to start thinking about buying that. So that's just an example of really all three of those things have to be there in order to really invest in a succession plan.
Yeah, very well said. Very, very well said. All right. Let's talk about compensation. We know it's sometimes we're actually having an internal meeting preparing for this webinar, and I think it was Sophie made the comment. It kind of boils down to dollars at some point in time. So let's talk about that. Retention does involve compensation. And the key thing with compensation is really having the confidence that what you're offering as a company is competitive with the type of the job, in the location that the person is in. And so having that ability to market price your compensation is really, really important. And just know that is a service that Core Talent provides and can provide for our clients. And so if that's a concern of yours, we're happy to have that conversation. I think equally important is this understanding that total rewards is as important as pay, just traditional compensation. And so total rewards really is about the entirety of the benefits package. So it's not just compensation, it's also things like PTO, bonuses, variable compensation, which I know Mary's going to talk about more in just a quick second here. Parental leave, right? Not just maternal leave, but paternal leave. If you're open to it, things like remote work. Development opportunities are becoming more and more part of a total rewards package. If you join our company, we will grow you in these ways, right? Those are real incentives that cause people to want to join organizations. And so, yes, it's good to have accurate and competitive market pricing for your employees' pay, but it's also really, really healthy to think about the total rewards. And Mary, I know you've been thinking a lot in terms of matching incentives to your overall company objectives. Is there something you wanted to share about that?
Yeah, a couple things. I'm sure everybody's hearing about these bonus retention plans, right? And all you have to do is Google do retention bonuses work. And unfortunately, short-term retention bonuses almost never works. And take it from recruiters who talk to candidates every day. We can't tell you how many times we are told, well, I get my retention bonus, in a couple of months. So that would be my start date, in terms of looking at a new assignment. Now, there are other types of retention plans that do work, and oftentimes those are longer term. And a lot of us who have been around for a while are probably more familiar with the 10-year vesting policies, universal whole life policies. There are so many new ways to pay people and to retain them over a period of time. It doesn't have to be 10 years. It could be 5 years. It could be 3 years. There are, policies that are new today that, can gain interest and, help your key employee should they, or their family should they become disabled. So there's just a lot of different ways to incent people beyond short-term, pay plus bonus or incentives. And so just know that. And every day there's new ways. The other thing is we see a lot of companies moving to profit sharing, which can be really, enticing. But I think what's really important is to look at what your company objectives are, look at your people. If you have an organization where the mass isn't going to really care about an annual profit sharing, but you have some key people that you need to make sure are with you the next 3, 5, 7+ years, you may be better off using that pool of money more creatively for a smaller group of people. So it's again, every company is different, and we just hate sometimes when companies go out there and look at best practices, because there are some, but they have to really match what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, very well said, Mary. Thank you. Okay, we threw a lot at you. So as Mary mentioned, what changed or what didn't change? Maybe you were validated in your original concerns, but why don't you, based on the exact same set of questions in the chat, let us know what are your top questions now that we've gone through all of the elements of the people plan. And I also noticed as you're chatting, as you're typing in your answers, I noticed Allison put a link to where you can sign up for our newsletter right in the chat. That is so handy. Thank you, Allison, for making it so easy. So if what Mary shared with you about our upcoming talk at the event is called Twin Cities Business Group, you can learn more about that there. I don't see anybody entering their answers into the chat. Maybe there's just like so much good content swimming through their head. It's so hard to, think about what was most impactful because it was all impactful. Tim, you said, gee, uh-oh. So we gave Tim a sense that he can't not do any of it. Same with Krista. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe that's a bad thing. I'm going to say that's a good thing. I mean, it's all important, as Mary said. And so if you're walking away thinking, man, there's a lot of opportunity out there, that's a positive outcome rather than a negative one. All right. Oh, we have a question. We have a question around quiet quitting, which I was wondering if that was going to come up today. Mary, I'm going to ask you the question because I think you're probably in the best position to answer it. How do you plan succession around quiet quitters who are waiting for retirement but not giving a date? So actually, that's a different flavor of the quiet quitting conversation, but I'd still be curious to get your perspective.
Yeah, it's such a great question. In fact, as I was talking to my sister, who's a compensation expert and has done it her entire career, about our own plans at Core Talent, one of the things she said to me is, yes, you can talk to your people to find out what's important, but don't expect that they're always going to be completely open and honest with you, right? So that is just a reality. And there are certain situations where you may not know what somebody's planning to do or you suspect. And I think, that's just a part of business. I do think, though, that you will know if the person has the capacity, so both the interest and the ability to maybe to flex and to continue to grow or not. And that's really where performance data comes into play. If you've had conversations over the past and you don't see that spark or that interest, maybe that passion is not there. And not to say that that person is not giving you what you need today, but you may need to rethink that role in the future or part of that role. And I think that goes back to Rick. He mentioned this 9 box, which has been around forever, and that's like figuring out your people with the most potential and interest. And the old way was like 9 boxes, and now we have like a 5 box, so it's a lot easier. But there will be people who are doing the job that are perfectly happy being in that role until they retire, and that is okay. And we need to embrace that. And we may need to get creative on those functions that you need done elsewhere. And it doesn't have to be a traditional job role. So that's where we really get granular around, what you need in the future and who's going to be accountable for that.
Yeah,
Is
very
that
well. Yeah.
anything to add, Rick?
No, the only thing I would add, and this isn't necessarily a direct response to quiet quitting, this is more about succession planning in general. I think having that conversation with the employee around their interest in the role is so critical for succession planning. I've watched leaders put so much time and energy into creating a succession plan, sometimes even getting to the point where they're going to offer the role to somebody and they're not interested. And so treating that as a critical path and not saying you're going to promise the job, but like, hey, you are being considered for this role. Is that something that you're interested in? You just don't know what they're going to say until you broach that topic. And so, again, it doesn't explicitly address quiet quitting, but it does bring home the point that unless you've at least gauged their interest, you're just never going to know. And my guess is that if they are interested, well, that might influence their quiet quitting behaviors, so to speak. All right, we have about 9 minutes until the top of the hour, and I want to make sure to get you out of here on time. Mary and we could talk about this until cows come home, I think. So we'll move forward. We mentioned at the very beginning, we'd reference some common scenarios in terms of what the need to have a people plan looks like in your organization. And so some of the things that we often hear that prompts, our entry point to a people plan type of a conversation are comments like, well, we have aggressive growth goals, right? We're working hard to grow our business. We want to invest in our people. That's often a common one that I hear, at least. We're launching a new line of business, right? There's a lot that goes into that from a people planning perspective. I actually had a conversation a couple weeks around what was going to be needed as a company launched a new line of business. We're expanding our leadership team, right? We want to elevate someone and what goes into that, both in terms of setting that person up for success and then making sure they're a good leader for the rest of the organization. Going through an acquisition. And then I think my personal favorite, I want to get out of the day-to-day. I want to have my team step up. It's just one of the best opportunities because it's such fertile ground for engaging in that people planning conversation. Now, if you're sitting in your chair and you're thinking, I don't know where to start. That's okay. The best place to start is your accountability chart and really just thinking through what roles are you going to need to achieve your goals. Think about 2 to 3 years into the future. Who will you need on your team? What capabilities will those people be providing? And then, this actually is a perfect segue from some of our previous conversations. Who's going to step up and fill these roles, right? We talked fairly great detail around the benefits of filling internally. But it's not a fail-safe. If you need to hire externally, you can start to create a plan for that too. So just in a quick recap, just to kind of summarize everything that we've talked about so far, a people plan at its most simple level is a plan for talent growth that advances your business plan. It's a way to create clarity and confidence around your business goals. It's a way to align the efforts of your people, and it's a way to basically show to your employees that you're looking out for them, that you're going to help them grow their careers as they help you grow your business. What you see on the screen here is it's a one-page summary of everything that we shared with you, and we're actually going to be sending this out. So as a thank you for spending this hour with us, we're going to be sharing this tool and resource. You can kind of keep it on your desk, so to speak, and reference it as you think about your own need to create a people plan. And if you're curious to learn more, there is actually a process to this exercise. And so we kind of talked about some of the specific tactics and the specific outcomes, but there's a specific methodology that either we can help support and facilitate or that you can use with your own organizations around starting with your business goals and your business strategies and working all the way to knowing what your top priorities and then, of course, executing and getting better as an organization. Now, just a little bit of last advice. And I think, Mary, you hit the nail on the head at the very beginning of this webinar. This can, it can get complex. That's probably why we have jobs, right? But it doesn't have to be. You can keep it simple. You can actually make a lot of progress just doing the simple things. If there's one tangible piece of advice, it'd be don't wait too long, right? It's a lot easier to keep your top employees rather than to backfill them with new people. And so, think about what you can do now before waiting, before it hurts too badly. And then just know that if there is additional benefits to getting the people part, right? We talked about how do you help your business grow. It's worthwhile spending about 30 seconds saying, when you do these things, the research is overwhelmingly clear. People are going to work together more effectively, so collaboration is going to go up. You're going to have a more engaged team, more engaged workforce. So that's things like greater productivity and profitability because more engaged people are more productive, lower stress within your workforce, and then people will stay longer, right? It's expensive to backfill, and so being able to improve your overall retention is really, really helpful. I don't know, Mary, anything you wanted to add before our last exercise?
Yeah, I think one last parting comment, I see this too, and I experience this myself, like how much of this do we share with our broader, employee base, right? And yes, it can be a bit risky at times because you share ideas, future roles that may or may not happen or change, right? And I think that's okay. This is about transparency. The one thing I have learned being a business owner and being in the talent business is the more transparent you can be, the easier everything is. Even if you change your mind, if you can keep your employees engaged along the process and share as much as possible, even if those things change, it's always better in the end. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a great comment, Mary. And I'm thinking about leaders that I've watched do that. And when the changes do happen, they're able to say, this has changed and here's why. And then the net result is that employee has such a clear understanding around the strategy of the business and maybe the strategy of their department and how their role connects to all of the different levels of the organization. And so I just think it's very, very well said. Okay.
All right.
All right, so this is it. We've spent 57 minutes talking about people planning to get to this point. What are you going to do with this information? So, just take a look at all of the different actions on the screen. Make a commitment to do one. What's the one takeaway that you're going to walk away from? If you're willing to put it in the chat, I would be really interested to know what it is. If you just write it down on a piece of paper, that's okay too.
And while we're waiting on that, are we going to follow up with a survey for this?
Yep.
Yeah.
Every webinar, we send out the recording, so you'll get that in your inbox. For this webinar, we'll send out that handout. Actually, the slide we're looking at right now, you'll get it in a PDF format. And then we also send out a survey to get your feedback.
And I know I'm like the rest of you. I hate surveys and it's tedious. We promise we'll make it easy, but we really, really want to know your opinion. And we want to make changes if there's areas that we need to provide more content, better content.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, we do this for you. Obviously, we like talking about this stuff, but we want to make sure it's valuable for you. So if there's a different approach or even a different topic, that's absolutely the kind of information we want to know. Excellent. I see some comments coming, and this is great. Develop future leader, develop talent, retain your best people. Excellent. Well, as our final comments come in, I will just quickly say, we do a lot with clients around people in terms of helping them think more strategically, get those people plans in place. And so just know if you've got a question about your people, we're happy to have it on the screen or some of the products that you can learn more on our website about. But more than anything, thank you. It's just been a pleasure spending this hour with you and hope you're able to think about something a little bit differently about your people and look forward to potentially keeping this conversation going at a later date.
Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.